Currently, the Chinese economy has plunged into a steep recession. Besides foreign investment rapidly withdrawing, numerous private companies are also closing down. In August 2023, Guangdong's private chemical enterprise, Southern Pet Corporation, applied for bankruptcy due to defaulting on a debt of 4.6 billion yuan. In October 2023, Yongchang, Yunnan's private steel conglomerate of 31 companies, declared collective bankruptcy. In November 2023, China's largest private enterprise among the Fortune Global 500, Amer International Group, faced a debt crisis.
To boost the private economy, the Beijing authorities started rolling out a series of preferential measures in July of last year. These include 31 policies to promote the development of the private economy and 25 policies to support the private economy. Additionally, on December 28th, they passed the latest revised Company Law of the People's Republic of China, which takes effect on July 1st, 2024. This revision is considered the biggest economic reform by the Chinese Communist Party since the initiation of reform and opening up. In other words, medium to large-scale private enterprises in mainland China, typically defined as those with over 100 employees and total assets exceeding 80 million yuan, will find it exceedingly difficult to survive independently starting from this July. Their only viable option for survival is to seek affiliation with state-owned enterprises, a process known as mixed ownership reform. State-owned enterprises can take controlling stakes or at least invest in them. Essentially, it's like finding a sugar daddy. However, deep down, they feel unwillingly and resentful because nearly all previous cases of mixed ownership reform have ended in failure.
Private companies value state-owned enterprises for their financial resources, assets, and networks. Meanwhile, state-owned enterprises focus on the dynamism, innovation, and talent often found in private companies. However, in recent years, there's been a trend where once private companies merge with state-owned ones, they lose their autonomy, innovation, and vitality. Many private business owners are reluctant to engage in such mergers for this reason.
The scary part about the newly revised company law isn't just about demanding paid-in registered capital. Although it's not a small sum, their requirement for actual payment of registered capital isn't solely about the money. Their appetite extends far beyond that. Let's start with paid or registered capital. What does registered capital actually mean? For instance, you and Bob plan to start a restaurant together, needing a startup capital of 1 million yuan. Each of you contributes 500,000 yuan, owning equal shares, making the registered capital 1 million yuan. If later you find that 1 million isn't sufficient, you can increase the capital proportionately to your shares. If the capital increase exceeds a certain range, it requires registration with the Industry Commerce Department. At that point, your registered capital isn't just 1 million anymore, it could be more. If the restaurant goes bankrupt due to poor management, you only bear the capital paid in. Your other personal assets are safe. That's the essence of a limited liability company. Previously, business registration followed a subscription system, a deferred payment when one pledged to pay the registered capital over a period of time, such as 10 to 20 years. Less registered capital isn't necessarily better. Many specific industries have minimum requirements for registered capital. After the new revision of the company law is implemented, subscription is no longer accepted. It must be paid up front. However, it doesn't require immediate payment. It gives a 5-year deadline. If you register your company after July 1st, 2024, you have 5 years to pay the registered capital after registration. But there are 2 exceptions. Sensitive industries may require immediate payment upon registration, and if there are debts to be repaid, you'll be required to expedite payment. The government explanation for this regulation is that during debt reinforcement, many companies have no money because they haven't paid the registered capital. However, in reality, many corporate legal persons simply don't want to repay debts. Living a lavish lifestyle while owning salaries to employees or even migrant workers is despicable. Therefore, to regulate the market and protect the rights of creditors, the new versions of the company law requires more expedited payment of registered capital. But this isn't the main reason. Their true intentions lies in the subsequent provisions. For example, the method of paying in registered capital isn't just about transferring money to the company account. It can also involve assessing intangible assets as a company is paid in capital, such as trademarks or patents. For instance, for a giant state-owned enterprise like China Poly Group, the two words poly can be used as intangible assets to act as paid in capital. If you want to open a chemical factory but lack funds, you can approach Poly Group, borrow the Poly name as paid in capital. Those two words alone could be valued at 50 million yuan, which usually should be sufficient for the registered capital. However, your chemical factory will have to be named Poly Chemical Factory, and Poly will take 50% of your shares, with half of the future profits going to Poly. In reality, Poly Group owns tens of thousands of patents, so picking out a few as paid in capital is feasible, but the value depends on assessment agencies. The new version of the company law also allows tangible assets such as real estate, vehicles, stocks, bonds, etc. to be valued and included as part of the registered capital. However, once a company goes bankrupt, these assets will be liquidated and cannot be kept, posing a huge risk to the personal assets of business owners. Some may wonder, is it possible to apply for a bunch of patents and trademarks as paid in capital after setting up a company? It's crucial to note whether patents are applied in the company's name or in the individual's names. Patents applied for in the company's name cannot be used as paid in capital. If patents are applied for individuals' names, attention must be paid to whether there is abuse of shareholder control, which could lead to serious consequences, including imprisonment. One thing to remember, the Chinese Communist Party, as a rule maker, never loses. In reality, after the implementation of the paid-in policy, medium to large-scale private companies in mainland China have extremely limited choices. They can either honestly pay in the registered capital and then be absorbed by state-owned enterprises, or choose to reduce capital or completely dissolve the company. The latter is very troublesome on the operation level. First, if you want to reduce capital, you'll be required to sign a joint liability commitment. In other words, if there is a debt default or other compensation liability in the future, you not only lose all your registered capital, but also risk having your assets like cars and houses auctioned off for compensation, essentially bearing unlimited liability. Moreover, once you reduce capital, it's akin to taking away funds from the company's books, and you'll need to pay 20% income tax. Even if you can accept all this, reducing capital requires public disclosure. If your creditors see that your company is reducing capital, they can freeze your account and demand accelerated payment. But the scariest part follows. If your company goes bankrupt and the registered capital isn't enough to repay debts, your company's parent company and even the parent company's parent company still bear joint liability. In mainland China, the main creditors are state-owned banks, which can make claims against your parent or subordinate companies. Even if your company doesn't have subsidiaries or parent companies, as long as you have other companies under your name, they also bear joint liability. If you use the company's intellectual properties as intangible assets to act as paid-in capital for other companies, those companies also bear partial joint liability. Under this combination of laws and regulations in communist China, the so-called limited liability company is practically non-existent. The newly revised company law also grants shareholders the right to access and duplicate shareholder lists, as well as certain shareholders in the right to inspect accounts. This new provision is set to protect the rights of small shareholders. Previously, some major shareholders would sometimes abuse their position to divert company interests to their other related companies, thereby harming the interest of small shareholders. However, this provision, coupled with the amendment of the criminal law to be implemented on March 1st this year, will lead to a serious consequence. The amendment changed the requirement for inter-industry competition. If you simultaneously operate multiple companies with competitive relationships, you could be sentenced to 3 to 7 years. The same goes if there's evidence of conflict of interest. For example, if you appoint your wife to a key position in the company, or if your relatives are the company's procurement agents, there is suspicion of interest diversion, and you could be sentenced to 3 to 7 years. Previously, such requirements only applied to state-owned enterprises, but now they're applied to private companies too. In this context, state-owned enterprises have become the only life-saving straw for private companies looking to survive under the new version of the company law. With the same interest diversion, state-owned enterprises have the excuse of loss of state-owned assets. Many issues can be resolved through internal negotiations, and they may not necessarily have to pay compensation in full because law enforcement agencies under the government's discretion often favor state-owned entities and have leniency. However, if it's a private company, it's a different story. Not only do they have to compensate in full, but they'll also face thorough audits and possibly imprisonment. In reality, this is a veiled form of the public-private partnership touted by the CCP. However, this isn't the most crucial aspect. The core provision of the amended company law is to uphold the CCP's leadership over state-owned entities, which essentially means the party's leadership over enterprises. In the near future, almost all medium to large-scale private companies will become state-owned enterprises. This provision stipulates that in state-funded companies, the CCP will exercise leadership and wield authority over management decisions, supporting the shareholder meetings, board of directors, board of supervisors, and the appointment and removal of senior management personnel. This means that the party will have the final say in the company's day-to-day affairs. Additionally, the new version of the company law redefines the scope of state-owned enterprises, expanding from wholly state-owned limited liability companies to wholly state-controlled limited liability companies and joint stock companies. Anyone holding shares in state-owned enterprises must accept the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. The board of directors of state-owned enterprises must seek approval from the local government before making significant decisions, and the company's founder loses ultimate discretion. So the government's control over companies will reach unprecedented levels. In fact, this has always been their way of doing things. Lan Shili was once the wealthiest man in Hubei. He was declared innocent after more than 4 years of house arrest and nearly 3 years of detention, becoming the first person released innocent under a red alert arrest. On October 25, 2023, Lan stated at a press conference in Beijing that for 7.5 years, from March 3, 2016 to the present, he has been under surveillance, criminally detained, arrested, and even after being declared innocent, he remains the target of various criticisms. As a well-known entrepreneur in Hubei with assets exceeding billions of yuan, he has been reduced to being a prisoner under surveillance and an A-level red notice individual, with several of his companies illegally confiscated by CCP state-owned enterprises in a collusion with local governments. Lan was born on February 13, 1960 in Wuhan, Hubei. In 1991, he founded Dongxing Electric Co. and later expanded into the catering and tourism industries. In 2003, he acquired Hankou International Travel Agency and obtained the right to exit China, opening travel branches in Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and other places. In 2005, after obtaining approval from the Civil Aviation Administration of China, he began planning China's first private airline, East Star Airlines, officially entering the aviation industry and attracting international attention. In 2008, the US subprime mortgage crisis erupted. East Star Airlines, which had assets exceeding 20 billion yuan, was impacted by various challenges, including rising oil prices, snow disasters, earthquakes, and financial crisis. In response to these difficulties, the airline proposed a deal to sell 25% of its equity for 100 million to China National Aviation Holding Corporation, hereafter referred to as China National. However, China National did not respond positively to this proposal. Then, Air China, a subsidiary of China National, claimed to acquire 100% of East Star Airlines equity for only 1 yuan. This absurd plan received strong support from the CCP Hubei provincial government and Wuhan municipal government. Without Lan's knowledge, during the CCP's 2 sessions in 2009, they signed the cooperation agreement with Air China in Beijing. Of course, Lan strongly opposed the merger plan. Subsequently, there were 4 arrests of Lan within a week. The Wuhan authorities fabricated charges and sentenced him to 4 years in prison. Lan was forced to sign the agreement for China National to acquire East Star Airlines. In the end, they just put you in a dark room like that.
Yes, exactly.
The person directly in charge, isn't he the deputy mayor of Wuhan?
Yes, even the chief of police told me, "You're innocent, but he wants to detain you, and I can't release you."
He is in charge of the political and legal system, right?
Yeah, he's the executive deputy mayor, because he's got a powerful sword, which is the agreement signed between the Hubei provincial government and Air China.
Actually, it's not really related to Air China.
Air China lost 13 billion that year. If he acquires E-Star Airlines, which has assets close to 20 billion, even though they lost over 13 billion, by acquiring E-Star Airlines at a very low cost, it fills the gap of the loss.
There is news coverage about this?
Yes, there's coverage. The media covered it. China Entrepreneur Magazine's China Aviation Monopoly specifically talks about this. He didn't just do this with E-Star Airlines. Later, he did the same thing with Shenzhen Airlines. Once he arrests a boss, the company becomes his, without spending a penny. I call this a typical pirate company. Shenzhen Airlines had the same fate.
Is the boss still in jail?
Still in jail, reportedly sentenced to 14 or 18 years.
But Shenzhen Airlines is still Shenzhen Airlines.
Now it's 100% owned by Air China. Their shares have changed.
The name hasn't changed. However, from another perspective, is it really reliable to entrust oneself to a state-owned enterprise? The answer is obviously no. Let's take a look at recent bankruptcies of central enterprises in the construction industry. On December 7th, 2023, the immediate People's Court of Shuozhou City, Shanxi Province, issued a bankruptcy announcement. China Energy Construction Group Shanxi Electric Power Construction Company 2 is heavily indebted and declared bankruptcy on November 28, 2023. Shanxi Electric Power Construction Company 2 is wholly owned by China Energy Construction Group Co. Limited, established in 1981, with qualifications including first-grade general contracting for electric power engineering. The company's losses are attributed to its past real estate business and intense competition within the electric power construction industry, which has continually reduced its profitability. Actually, previously, several large local state-owned enterprises in the construction industry have applied for bankruptcy, restructuring, or liquidation, including, in October 2023, Henan National Construction Group, which holds a special grade for building construction, municipal construction, filed for bankruptcy restructuring. In June 2022, Fujian No. 6 Construction Group applied for bankruptcy. In April 2022, Jiangsu Nantong No. 3 Construction Group, holding a special grade for building construction, underwent debt restructuring. In January 2022, Jiangsu Nantong No. 6 Construction Group, also with special grade for building construction, filed for bankruptcy in restructuring. Special grade for building construction refers to having the highest qualification for building construction projects, while special grade for municipal construction refers to having the highest qualification for municipal construction project. In the current economic situation, even state-owned enterprises directly under the CCP central government are struggling to sustain themselves. Imagine the future outcome for private companies, including those affiliated with state-owned or local government-owned entities. In other words, for mainland Chinese private enterprises, the CCP has always pursued a policy of exploit and seize. In the past, this was often done through direct seizures, but now, with revisions to laws such as the company law and the criminal law, it has become more subtle under the guise of legitimacy. Although on the surface it is not as crude as before, the true intent has never changed.
Many existing laws and regulations have their absurdities. If they are not beneficial, they can be harmful, which is what author Mr. Wu Si calls legal persecution. Some of the laws that are made are not enforceable. Once enacted, any action you take would inevitably break the law. They will come after you when they decide to, using the pretext of illegality. This is termed legal persecution.
In summary, the revision of the new company law is in fact another power play by the CCP in the economic domain. Starting from July 1st this year, this economic reform will unfold in a more brutal manner. Large-scale public-private partnerships are about to begin. In this game, various enterprises in mainland China, especially medium to large-sized private companies, will face tremendous pressures. Their only choice to survive will be to seek and attach themselves to state-owned enterprises, a rather unreliable sugar daddy. This also serves as an excellent means to alleviate local government fiscal revenue pressures because there will be a large number of outstanding private companies actively seeking state-owned enterprise investments. State-owned enterprises only need to provide intangible assets. This is the real wolf in the sheep clothing. Looking at the long-term trend with the rapid and forceful advancement of the CCP's Public-Private Partnership 2.0 plan, mainland Chinese private companies will gradually find themselves in dire straits.